Okay, everybody, Misty Williams here with Healing Rosie, and really looking forward to chatting with our next guest today. I'm talking with Amy Johnson. She has the Little School of Big Change, and I'm really fascinated about the work she's doing. In my own journey to reclaiming my health, there's been a really significant part of my journey that has been about reclaiming my life, actually. When, as you guys know, whenever I had all the health challenges that came up for me back in 2011, one of the things that I had to do was take a look at how I was living my life and look at how my lifestyle had actually been this incredible contributor to what was happening in my body. And I wish I could say that, like, I just took a look and I saw what I needed to fix and I changed and it was like, better. But it actually has been a really long journey for me to basically rebuild my life. I actually went through a period back in 2016 where it felt like my entire career was incinerating. I had built this business and I was so unbelievably burnt out. I was having issues with people poaching, like team members poaching clients. And I didn't like who I'd become, doing the work that at one point I really loved. And there's been so many times that I've had to really look in the mirror and see that the way that I'm living my life isn't really working for me and it's creating a lot of stress. And this is a big contributor to what's happening in my body. So I know, Amy, this is like your area. Like this is something that you've become so passionate about, that you have developed this unbelievable program and you've really made this your life's work. And I'd love for you just to maybe start out talking to us a little bit about the Little School of Big Change and maybe how you got into this work and your background and what you're doing for people.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. I love what I saw of your community and was really excited to talk. Um, yeah, so you mentioned stress, and it's like that's such a word that we just throw around and everybody feels it and we just know what it is. And we have all these super innocent misunderstandings about it, where it's like it looks like stress comes from what's happening out in the world or even what's happening in our health or what's happening over here in our life or what's happening there. And what I love kind of looking at and what I share where all of my work really is kind of where our experience really comes from. So of course we go through hard things in life and we want to get out of them and we want to make changes in what's going on in our lives and stuff all the time. But it's so fascinating to kind of look a level deeper than that and to see, hey, like the same circumstance can feel incredibly stressful and hard and heartbreaking and gut wrenching and all of that in one moment. And in the next moment, we're still in that circumstance and it feels a little different. Like we can have a different experience in that same circumstance. So really what I kind of help people see as it pertains to anxiety, stress, habits, addiction, which are all just ways that we cope with anxiety and stress, right? Is where our experience is coming from, and that moment to moment in life, it's coming from thought moving through us. So it's always coming from within us. Now, that doesn't mean we're causing it or we're creating it. Of course, we don't do that stuff on purpose. But to start to get really clear on the true source of our experience, to see that, oh, this is like my mind is saying, I can't handle this. This is stressful. It's not life doing it to me. It's coming from within me. That flips so much of how we handle things and how we cope with things and what we do in life. It flips it on its head. It really has us looking in a different direction. And that just starts to change so much for people.
So, how did you get into this work? I mean, there's so many things running through my head. I actually want to like pummel you with questions right now, but I really would like for people to understand maybe the space that you're coming from. I'm sure that you had your own experience with all of this that ended up being really deeply transformative.
Yeah, many, 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 as you have, like as we all have, right? And that's what's so awesome about our struggles is that's like we work from the understanding we get from being through all that. For me, I lived in a lot of anxiety for my whole life up until like my mid 20s. Panic attacks, didn't leave my house for a long time. I mean, just tons of anxiety. And as that started to change form, I thought I kind of had it under control. But what was really going on is I just found ways to cope with it. And those were things like eating disorders. And so I dealt with that for a long time. Now, all the while, I was trained as a psychologist. I was coaching people, I was helping people, and I did see some things that were helpful, but it wasn't really helping me, you know? So there was more to it than met the eye. And I knew that. I knew there was like something missing. And so, really as a way to finally end my binge eating habit, which I was in for 8 years, I came across this understanding that I share now, and it was the only thing that ever really deeply helped. And again, it's kind of around seeing like, wow, I'm experiencing all this discomfort. And of course, I'm doing anything I can to feel better in the moment. So in the case of binge eating, it was eating, or in my case, not eating when I wasn't eating. So I'd starve and binge and go through those cycles. I knew it was crazy. I knew it was irrational. I knew it wasn't healthy. But in that mindset, like in the fog of that thinking, it was the best I could see to do to feel better. And when I started to see where my experience was really coming from, and how my mind settles on its own, and all the kind of stuff that I share now, it just didn't make sense anymore. It's crazy, but my mind got really quiet, and it all kind of fell away, and I could just kind of use, easier ways to move through my experience.
Mm-hmm. So tell us about easier ways. What does that look like? What were you discovering?
Yeah. One of the key things that was so huge for me and for people I work with is seeing that our experience moves through us, right? And it's not us, and it's not ours, and it isn't as personal and meaningful as it appears. So like we might feel, again, stressed out, we might feel depressed, we might feel anxious, we go through all kinds of things, but being in a place where we can see, oh, all human beings work in the same way. If you're depressed, that's depressed thought and feeling moving through you. It isn't about you. And that's so hard to see for any of us in any moment, because our whole mind and our ego and all of that is all about kind of grabbing the experience that's moving through us and making it about us. And that's not us being selfish. It's just how it looks, right? I mean, that's just kind of how we are used to seeing things. So we feel something and we instantly kind of go in and own it and tell a story about it and think, why am I feeling this way? And what do I need to change? And what's wrong with me? And a lot of times what that does is just add so much to a feeling that's just passing through. So much of it, I hope that makes sense. Like so much of it is about kind of just letting life move through us in a sense, and knowing that, again, yes, of course, like we make changes and we do things in life that move us forward, but that's kind of just common sense. Like we'll be able to just naturally see what we want to do and do it if we aren't so caught up in the experience moving through us. When we sort of see, oh, this is kind of like weather. It's just like weather moving through me, and I don't have to change it and fight it and take it so personally.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of some stuff that I learned early in my personal development journey. I went to my first Tony Robbins event when I was 26 years old, I believe. It was actually a couple months after 9/11, down in Florida, and airfare and everything was really cheap because no one was traveling then. I remember that about it. But I was really struck by one of the things that he was teaching in his Unleash the Power Within event, around managing and coping with life. And he gave us all a powerful question. When we're confronted with something that's really scary, it's hard to look at. When something happens that creates a lot of stress for us, when, we find out someone that we love has cancer, that we've lost our job, that, we're being evicted from our home, that we're losing our car, like this devastating news that, we hear about, and we tend to want to do things to medicate because the pain is so great. He told us all to ask ourselves, what else could this mean? These terrible things are happening, and what else could this mean? And I remember being so struck by the idea that our brains and our minds are so quick to make meaning of what's happening, and then we move into reaction, right? So we hear about our mom that has cancer, and the first thing we think is, oh my God, if my mom dies, how am I going to cope and live with life? And we begin to spiral because of the meaning that we assign to these experiences that are coming at us. In the experience that I had in 2016 that I was just alluding to earlier in our conversation, where I really felt it's probably the scariest time that I've ever had in my life, even scarier than going through my health stuff. I remember talking to a friend and just being so scared and feeling all this despair. And I told her with like probably this timid, pitiful voice, because I was utterly exhausted. I said, I just feel like everything in my life is falling apart. And she said, Misty, listen to yourself. What if everything in your life was falling together? What if it was falling together? And there was something inside of me that just kind of leapt in that moment of, oh my God, what if this could mean something else? What if it doesn't mean what I think it means?
Yeah.
And I think what you're talking about here is really, really powerful, because our entire physiology and our state and how we live and how we're showing up in the world and the fight or flight stuff that gets activated when hard things are happening to us is so unbelievably powerful. And if we don't have tools in that moment to help us cope, to mitigate, honestly, our own response that's going to make things worse. Like if I continued letting myself spiral into everything is falling apart, if I had let myself go down, I mean, I don't know what might have happened to me in that situation. And I honestly wasn't strong enough to think of that on my own, but I had an amazing friend who gave me this powerful reframe. And I remember just meditating on that when everything felt so despairing, like, what if everything is falling together? What if everything is falling together? And I couldn't see it falling together, but I hoped it would.
Yeah.
You know? And that really had me showing up differently in that situation.
I love that. I mean, I think that's what's so great about that question. Like, what if there's another meaning to this? Not that we go make up another meaning, but that it just asks that what if question. Like, what if the way it looks to you right now is not the way it is? That's enough. Like, because the thing that's so horrible, I mean, it just looks so real. So to just question that is huge.
Yeah. So basically what we're talking about here is navigating change in our lives. And I actually had a client that I used to work with a few years ago that had a talk called "Change is Hard, You Go First." Like, it's so hard to do it. Somebody else needs to do it first, So I think one of the challenges that we all face when we want something to change in our life is that we're confronted with just maybe not knowing how to make things change or make things different. And, as I get older, I get really into things like human design and the Enneagram and things that help us understand how we're wired, because it's so easy for us to make ourselves wrong in how we are, to heap shame and guilt on ourselves for not being different than how we are. Can you talk a little bit about navigating this process of change in life?
Yeah, I think I love that you mentioned those things, because I think that they can be so comforting and so just insightful. Like you said, they take so much of the shame and the personalness out of it. And it's like, oh, this is just my tendency. This is how I tend to see life and approach life, right? Mm-hmm. And I've seen that. And for me too, like, brings so much comfort and understanding and compassion where we used to.
How I'm wired. Yeah. Like, I was born this way. It's okay.
Exactly. So I love that. And like, I guess what I see is even one a little bit better than that, even is like, okay, here's how I'm wired, right? That's my wiring, my psychology, my tendencies. But what's really awesome, especially when we're looking to navigate change, is like, even in our wiring, we're not like hardwired. We're not we have those tendencies. But even then, the most introverted person in the world is extroverted sometimes. The most extroverted person is introverted sometimes, So that's what I think is so cool, is seeing like we have this psychology that's extremely habitual and runs, and the wiring and all that. But there's a whole us that's able to even watch that and read books about it and talk about it. So there's a whole us that's beyond all of that. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think it's so helpful to kind of lean into that when we're looking toward change, because you know what I mean? Like, it's like there's our wiring and what we do and what we've done. And even if we can hold that kind of loosely, like take it for what it's worth and get all the great value from it, but even hold that loosely and see, wow, but anything can move through me in any moment. And if I'm not chained to this, personality type or whatever, it's amazing what opens up and what we kind of allow to move through.
I'm thinking of Brene Brown's work around vulnerability, because to even move into that place of openness, right? To move into a place where we can let things go through us, we actually have to learn how to open up a little bit. We have to move from a place of forcing things to happen and fighting against the tide and the current to letting go and allowing and surrendering. Do you have tools or strategies or a framework that can really help people with that process?
Yeah, but it isn't, I do, and it's a framework is a good word for it. It's not tools and strategies so much because I think it's less about doing something in the moment. Like we'll do things in the moment that make sense to us, but more about seeing, kind of like you're saying, like every human on earth, the way we're designed, we get this idea of who we are and then we cling to it. That's not good, bad, and different. It's just how we work, right? It's not a weakness. It's not a flaw. It's like our minds do that. We're bigger than our minds, but our minds find so much comfort in here's who I am and here's how life goes for me. And we don't even recognize we're doing it half the time, right? So it's like seeing that a mind does that is so insightful. Like people start to see, oh, so when I feel vulnerable, opening up, when I feel scared to death of change, when I feel like everything's falling apart in my life, my mind is doing that. That's not life doing that. That's not truth. That's a human mind that says, nope, I want to be efficient and this is who I am and this is what I'm going to get. So it's almost like this bigger understanding that I share in my school. It talks about that and it helps us see, oh, this is how a mind works. All of them, all 7.5 billion minds on earth work in this way. And when we kind of see how it works, again, we start to find some kind of freedom in it so that in the moments when it's doing that, we know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. So for the person who's feeling like I can see myself in what Misty and Amy are talking about, I can see that I'm stuck in this pattern of responding in a certain way to life. And I can see that I tend to lean into things maybe that aren't so good for me. I tend to be really codependent in my relationships, or I tend to attack the people that I love, or I tend to resort to drugs or alcohol in order to sedate me so that I don't have to feel all the feelings that are come up. For that person that's like, I can see myself and I don't know what to do next, what would you tell them?
Yeah. I'd say it's really about, I mean, it's great that you can kind of know that we notice our stuff, right? But seeing that all that stuff, like everything you just mentioned, those patterns and the habits and addiction and all that, that's all at the level of our psychology, all of it. So like we can notice that. Sometimes you can see your mind running to the wine or to be angry or to do whatever it habitually wants to do. And sometimes, we have those moments where we just see our mind going there, but we don't have to follow it. And other times we feel like we're just pulled along, right? Other times we feel like we do follow it. But if you can get a sense of, oh, wow, there's a separation there. And that's what I think just kind of immersing in this understanding does. We aren't what our mind and our habits and our patterns have us think we are. We're bigger than that. So we get to have that separation and keep looking. I think,
Mm-hmm.
seeing your mind going there and then seeing, oh, wow, I'm able to sit back here and notice that, gigantic. And eventually, as people kind of look in this direction, that gap grows, where it's like you notice your mind going to the habitual stuff, but you're like, oh, no, I don't do that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know that you have helped a lot of people with this work. This is something that you've really given your life to. Why don't you talk to us about some of the students who've gone through your program and the kind of lasting change that they've been able to create in their life by adopting a new perspective on how they're relating to things that are happening to them?
Yeah. So, yes, there've been so many, and my favorite kind of people to work with and that come through a lot are the ones who have tried everything. And usually, because that was me, like usually in a really hard way, tried everything. Like they've done every mantra, they've done every affirmation, they've done every diet, they've done every crystal, like they've done the hard stuff that feels like it gives you a little bit of hope, but it just doesn't feel like it goes deep enough. It doesn't actually change how you view life. It just sort of changes something on the surface level. So by getting this bigger understanding, that's like, oh, here's who I am as a spiritual being, and here's how my psychology works. It goes so much deeper than that. So lots and lots of people come through with various habits, a lot of eating related habits, but not all. A lot of people that want to stop drinking, a lot of people that are just have internet addiction, things like that. And they've attacked it at the behavioral level. So they've done the right things. They've cleaned the apps off their phone. They've cleaned out their cupboards of the wrong foods, all that stuff. And it didn't last, as we know. I mean, it's such a Band-Aid. And so as they start to flip this and see, wow, what if I am completely habit free and I'm fine. It's just that my mind thinks that I need food all the time, or I need wine all the time, or I need my phone all the time. And you start to see that thinking in a new way. It's awesome. Like so many people who have tried everything kind of start to get a feel for this, and they find themselves, without having to use willpower and discipline, they just sort of find themselves feeling better because they connect with who they are beyond the psychology level. And
Right.
as that psychology settles down, the need to grab and add and do all these, the numb, it just kind of
Mm.
settles down with it. So
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. So habits and anxiety is another huge thing that people find a lot of relief with.
Well, you have created an amazing 4-part series that helps people to understand how to find freedom from all of the changes and habits and addictions that we're struggling with in our life. I'd love for you just to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the 4-part series starts shortly. You can give the link to sign up, and it's basically a movie. It's like 2.5 2 hours worth of content, but it's split up into 4 short videos that really walk people from the beginning all the way through to like a deep understanding of what we're talking about. So who we are beyond our psychology, and then how our psychology works and how it gets us duped and stuck into all these habits and patterns.
Yeah. I was actually having a conversation with someone who was interviewing me for an event that she was doing, and she said, when when we when we're struggling with our health and we have all these health challenges, there's no one exempt. We all have to look and see what we're doing in our life and how we're living our life that's creating this for us. And that can be a really confronting idea. I'd like to think that I'm, a smart, responsible, reasonable person and that I'm living a good life and I'm doing the very best that I can. And there isn't anything that I'm, majorly doing wrong, so to speak. But, I see it in my friends. I see it in myself that there's a way that I've lived my life up to now that has created this reality that I'm experiencing. And if I really want to deeply heal, if I want to take things to the next level, it's so important that I don't just take a look at the health and lifestyle stuff that you think of when it
Yes.
comes to cleaning up your health, but you look deeper at the way in which you're showing up in the world and living your life. How are we abandoning our own needs? As women, I think that's like something that we tend to do in all sorts of ways all the time because there's so much that's demanded of women in our society of how we're showing up for our partners and how we're showing up for our kids and how we're contributing in our communities and there's nothing wrong with any of that stuff, but we do tend to abandon ourselves in that process. And, it's a big part of why we're getting sick. So if you're watching, I hope you will take advantage of watching this 4-part video series that Amy's put together with her little school of big change and, see if there's something in there that might be able to help support you in your journey as you're working on getting well. I wish all of us to have mentors in our life that would help us find our breakthroughs. So thank you so much, Amy, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Misty. It's great to talk with you.
You too. All right, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.